Good morning and happy Tuesday. Happy New Year. Welcome back to our Facebook Live sessions. Today we're going to be speaking to the importance of emotional boundaries. It's one of our most popular topics on our website and in our webinar, and that really should come as no surprise. Just a reminder, I'm Wendy Johnstone. I'm one of the two caregiver coaches with Family Caregivers of BC. And we work really closely with all of our staff at the provincial organization, but in particular with the caregiver support line staff on themes that they're hearing about in all of the caregiver support line calls and feedback from caregivers. And so we like to try and take what we're hearing and bring awareness to topics that caregivers are speaking to us about in our calls. We are by no means any experts in setting boundaries. We like to beg, borrow, and steal from all these amazing professionals that focus in on those particular areas. And I think I can speak for all of us at Family Caregivers of BC that we're all working our own personal boundary setting in our work, in our families, in our life. And so we try to tap into these tools just as much as we hope you do as well. So we've got many professionals who contribute to our growing list of I think really deep and rich resources on the website, and we'll be referencing them below in the comments as we go through today's live session. And I certainly encourage you to tap into what we have on our website to find more specific support or information on boundary setting and other great resources as well. I love the quote by Oprah Winfrey, and essentially, she says, you have to be able to set boundaries. Otherwise, the rest of the world is telling you who you are and what you should be doing. You can still be a nice person and set boundaries. I just think that's a great quote. So setting boundaries and being a resilient caregiver is about recognizing where we're at in our own lives, our family, and our work. And it looks very different, based on how we feel or how we learn or what resonates with you as a family caregiver. One of the interesting things is in my world, not only am I a caregiver coach, but I'm also a paid caregiver for some seniors in our community here. Quite a few of our staff are family caregivers to spouses, to aging parents, to other relatives, to friends. And so we have a real invested interest in this idea of trying to stay as healthy as possible. So there's lots of different tools out there, that can help give you a picture of where you're at in terms of your own emotions, how you know when those boundaries are being crossed. And so for each of us, it's a little bit different. For me on a personal level, because I'm juggling, many different roles and many different tasks, I like to look at where I'm sitting on a time commitment level. That's one of the things that really drives me in order to keep my emotional area, sort of in balance as much as that can be. So finding that, those tools for ourselves are really important. And it's trying to care within those limits once we help identify them. And I think there's this misconception that when we focus on our own abilities and our ability to continue to care, it means that we're not dedicated to caring. In fact, most of us and most professionals would say, well, that's the opposite. It's actually the opposite. Setting boundaries really allows caregivers to continue caring with compassion and devotion and love, and not to feel lost or swallowed up by what the caregiving role can entail. At the heart of it, boundaries are really a sign of self-respect for ourselves. So good, healthy boundaries let caregivers maintain this emotional connection to the person they're caring for, while trying to manage some of those negative results of this feeling that they need to fix a situation, they need to rescue someone, they need to control a situation. And so boundaries allow us to find this freedom to care and be ourselves at the same time, to love and care for someone while accepting this idea of our own responsibility for our own actions. So what are some good tips for setting boundaries? Well, we've taken a look at all of these wonderful resources we have online, spoken to a couple of counselors in this particular area, and we've got about 5 or 6 key areas. The first one is whose issue is this? Is it yours? Is it the person you're caring for? Is it another family member? So sometimes, what happens is when a boundary is crossed, or we're crossing a boundary, we have to, if we can figure out why we allow it and why we have challenges to set a clear boundary, then it gives us a better option for change, or a better option to know, okay, this is what's happening. How can I now, just bringing awareness into the situation is often very, very helpful. I think the other one that is really important is knowing how it feels when a boundary is crossed. So for example, if we start to feel this level of discomfort and resentment, those are often warning signs that we're out of sync with ourselves and our boundaries. And so if it feels like you're being taken advantage of or you're not being appreciated, it might reflect that you're pushing yourself too much, or that your expectations don't line up, with what's possible in the day or what's possible with another person. Or if the person that we're caring for is imposing their expectations, views, or values on us, then sometimes, that means that we're put into a position where we're really having to be clear about what we're comfortable with. So when someone acts in a way that results in a feeling of discomfort, it's often a sign that a boundary is being crossed. We talked a bit about this idea of we feel uncomfortable, or we feel resentful, or we feel like we're being taken advantage of, appreciated. Though those are common. That's common language that we often hear with family caregivers around feeling like boundaries have been crossed. That's just to kind of help bring some of those, that key wording I think is important. This idea of giving ourselves permission is another one that we often reference in our calls with family caregivers. This idea that in order to take care of ourselves and set boundaries sometimes feels like it's in direct conflict of feelings of guilt, of self-doubt that looking after ourselves is important. It can sometimes create this sort of conflict because we feel like we're choosing ourselves over somebody else. And often I think caregivers also feel that they should be able to cope with the situation, even though let's say their boundaries are being crossed, or they're having to take on more and more responsibilities. We somehow seem to feel like as caregivers that we should be able to cope with that situation. And so one of the things, and I know people who've watched these Facebook Live sessions or they've read our resources, will smile because we're going to come back to the analogy that we have to put our own oxygen mask on first. So it gives us enough oxygen and, perspective to better handle our role as a caregiver. Because when we don't have oxygen, right, we can't think clearly, we can't breathe, and, we need it on a daily basis. So this idea of putting our own oxygen mask on first gives us the energy and perspective to better handle our role as a caregiver. So some specific tips around caring within a boundary. So sometimes in our coaching calls and in our caregiver support line, one of the things that we'll do as an exercise with a family caregiver to help them to determine, what parts of caregiving is something only they can do. And so for some caregivers, there's very specific things within that relationship that only they can do. We'll often ask them if there are other activities that someone else could do And that someone else could be an organization, it could be private care, it could be publicly funded care, it could be a neighbor. And then, taking a look at all those activities and the possibility that maybe there's some areas where they can receive support, or that they can, sometimes it's actually about not doing something, it's about removing something. But if that's not possible, then taking a look at that list and seeing if there's any other areas where support can help alleviate some of those additional activities that we don't want to take on. Able to maybe go really broad, even if they seem a bit crazy or out there. Sometimes it brings the perspective back in to realize, okay, there's one or two options that we can investigate. It doesn't mean that you actually end up doing them, but sometimes knowing that there's options can help with caring within a certain boundary. So those are some of these areas of caring within boundaries, specifically looking at more the strategic, like what tasks, what can we say no to? Is there someone else that can, or some other organization that can help support us as family caregivers and release some of the responsibility from our shoulders. And finally, I think above else, it takes a lot of courage and practice to set boundaries and stay the course. So we need to be really kind to my internet. Oops, I hope that's okay. Sorry. Where to find more support and resources? Well, first of all, just a reminder that our caregiver support line is available Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. And the role of the caregiver support line is really to help support you based on your unique caregiving needs, to help bring awareness into your situation, to listen to you, to make suggestions, to direct you to resources. And of course, we can always refer you into more one-to-one support through our coaching service. We have our virtual caregiver support groups, and they're a wonderful place to talk about boundary setting. Nothing better than a peer group who's maybe shared a similar experience to you, to be able to bounce ideas off or just to listen to your experience. You can tune into our podcasts. We bring in lots of great personal stories from caregivers and touching on a whole range of emotional and pragmatic parts of caregiving. You can sign up for our newsletters. I love our newsletters. They're filled with such great tips. The Learning Center of our website has some really wonderful resources, through webinar, reading, podcasts, some sort of self-check-in booklets are often really great too. And just a reminder that, we're here for you, Family Caregivers of BC. We're happy to support you in any way that we can. And I thank you again for joining us and look forward to seeing you next month. Bye for now.